Um, welcome everybody once again. The next 4 lectures of our SIP lecture series, Society for Intercultural Philosophy lecture series, will all focus on the concept of Tianxia, which Tingyang ZHAO recently has proposed as a possible new world order based on different strands of Chinese tradition, as well as some ideas of liberal political theory, as most of you know, I suppose. Tingyang ZHAO will present his ideas in the first place, and 3 lecturers then will critically comment later on. That is, in October, Stephen Engel from Wesleyan University. Hello, Stephen. Georg Stenger in November from University of Vienna. Hi, Georg. And Aurélie Neveu from Paris, who cannot join us for this lecture, but will watch the record. Please note that due to the time lag, all these lectures will take place at 2 p.m. Central European Time. Tianxia is a central concept in classical Chinese philosophy. Literally translated, it means everything under heaven. Among other aspects, it denotes the political ideal of a world order. Tingyang ZHAO has taken up this aspect of Tianxia in several books, amongst them the one first published in 2005 and since translated into numerous languages, with the aim of, as he says, realistically presenting the idealistic concept of Tianxia in order to make it interesting for the present. ZHAO places particular emphasis on the fact that Tianxia is an integrative order that encompasses the entire world and knows no outside. Unlike the political philosophy of the West, which in his view resorts to nation-state concepts and must therefore always seek to balance different interests, Tianxia is able to ensure peace and security for all simply by starting from the world. According to him, to ZHAO, the concept of Tianxia emerged in the 11th and 10th centuries before our time, driven primarily by the Duke of Zhou. The philosophy of Tianxia incorporates elements of Daoism, Moism, Guan-zi, Confucius, and Xun-zi. ZHAO complements them with individual moments of liberal political theory. In the 4 lecture sequence of the SIP lectures, the concept of Tianxia, and in particular ZHAO's adaptation of this concept to modern political philosophy, will be appreciated and critically discussed. ZHAO Tingyang graduated from Renmin University of China and Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and now is a professor in the Institute of Philosophy at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And he is also a senior fellow of Beijing University Berggruen Research Institute. Thank you, Tingyang, once again for accepting this invitation. I'm very grateful for this. Your presentation today is entitled The Maze of Tianxia All Under Heaven, and the floor now is yours.
Hello, thank you, Niels. It's a great honor for me to discuss Tianxia with all of you here. Thank you very much for your being here. Since you have maybe you have read my book translated in German or in English, so I don't want to repeat the content of the book. I would like to talk something further about this idea, Tianxia, this idea. I mean, my ontological argument underlying this theory. I know you, Tianxia, this concept might look strange to Europeans to Western people because of its Chinese face. However, we have learned more strange words from sciences, such as quantum or entropy. And even a new one I have just learned recently, it is very strange, granularity, now used in science of complexity. They remain somewhat strange to our experience, even if understood with our reason. So I have tried to change Tianxia's strange face into a universal one, a supposedly accessible, best possible world. Allow me to use Leibniz the concept to make a logical face for it. I hope Leibniz would appreciate it. On my part, I'm encouraged by Leibniz insights. Although the ontological composition of Tianxia differs from Leibniz's best world, we will discuss it later. I know some Western scholars might defensively take Tianxia as a China plan. It is not true, except it is a Chinese vocabulary. Actually, I use it as a theoretical concept or a scientific one, if I could say so, which suggests a universal world system of and for the whole world and all peoples. Neither the Chinese ambition nor a Confucian story. By the way, the first conception of Tianxia was several centuries ahead of Confucius. And my reconception of Tianxia goes much beyond Confucianism. You must have noticed I hesitate to say a Tianxia by all people because world democracy seems still unrealistic and more likely disastrous if in practice now. Tianxia as a widest public choice remains an open question. I try to argue a theory of smart democracy could be perhaps good for Tianxia, which is supposed to be an intelligentized democracy so that it could work as if it had intelligence by its own, just embedded in its voting system, and probably even smarter when enhanced by AI and blockchain or metaverse. It's quite a long story, so just let it. It is still too early to estimate it before experience or practical test. Now we go back to Tianxia. The original concept of Tianxia came in the said golden age of early China, approximately Homer's age, at least 500 years earlier than Confucius. It was a poetic age of transcultures before the cultural identity or uniformity by the Emperor Qin the Great in 221 BC. My updated redefinition of Tianxia keeps its original genes of transcultures on modern conditions. The new Tianxia should be an agreement between idealism and realism. Therefore, a new Tianxia expects no utopia, but rather a reasonable contopia. I fabricate this word, contopia, hopeful to solve global challenges. The rapid increase of entropy in our world, such as climate changes, ecological crisis, the collapse of civilizations, international hostilities, fragmentation of society, loss of consensus, and unpredictable technological risk. It is obvious the most global problems are unlikely settled in non-cooperative game. International or geographical politics have failed the world due to their ontological limitations in size and structures. The world needs a system of world size and new structures. As I have argued in my book, a new Tianxia as a possible best world should be established upon three constitutional concepts. First, the internalization of the world, inclusive all nations in a shared system, so that making a world of no negative externalities. Second, relational rationality, which emphasize the priority of minimization of mutual hostility over maximization of self-interest. And the third, the Confucian improvement, which requires one improved if and only if all other improved. That is the non-exclusive improvement for everyone. I think it is better than the Pareto's improvement. Otherwise put, the Confucian improvement equals to the Pareto's improvement for everyone, or each gets Pareto's improvement. Then I would like to talk about the ontological measures for Tianxia. My ambition is to find a solution to Hume's problem that Kant fails to make it, so that political philosophy could be justified with ontological analysis without resort to political partiality or ethical claims. Simply put, I try to argue a world that which is ontologically good for itself, and eventually prove to be the one that which is ethical and politically good for everyone. It suggests a reasonable guess about God's mind. Many theologians or philosophers did it. I hope my guess is a better one. It relates to a big problem in my mind. I hope it is not so absurd, which is we do not have a fundamentally good concept of what is good. I mean, we do not know, we do not really know what is good, though we do many supposed good things. Socrates knows he doesn't know that, and the Confucius pretends knowing that. I think upon skeptical reason, we had better applicate all ethical presuppositions, since the world has been so created ontologically rather than ethically. Usually we are committed to certain ethical values underlying a normative theory, as if truth always goes in line with our assumed political correct values. Then it must sound somewhat strange for a normative theory such as Tianxia to rest on an ontological argument in place of any value-oriented argument. My skepticism is that a value-oriented claim is valid only when the values truly explain what things are good. But there is little chance for a value claim to defend itself from being an epistemological fallacy of taking values as good as truth, or otherwise an ontological fallacy of confusing ought to be with to be, as Debbie Hume sees it. We know that the description, it is so and so, excludes the case of it is good. And the statement, I believe it is good, is not an evidence that tells what is good. So it is a truth that values do not prove truth. If there is any transcendental value, it requires a transcendental argument. Kant develops wonderful transcendental arguments, but his categorical imperative seems not so convincing, since it doesn't necessarily imply the intersubjective validity, not to say the transsubjectivity. His categorical imperative fails to be universally good in all possible cases. That is not so robust in every possible case. We do love many good things, including freedom, justice, human rights, and democracy. Yet the awkward situation is that if rationally we have no universal truth or transcendental knowledge or self-evidence to prove our values. In other words, we fail in arguing our value hold good in any case or be good to everyone. What is good remains and always a problem. So I try an alternative way in terms of ontological measures that may better explain the robust foundation for a best possible world without a resort to any assumed value. Actually, I'm not the first one to think in this way. Lao Tzu was the most likely the first one who explained the political matters in line with the way of being known as Dao, free from any ethical value. And a more remarkable example must be Leibniz, who makes a most interesting guess of the God's choice of the best possible world upon ontological or mathematical reason. Human beings are unable to see all possible worlds as God does. Therefore, lack of the transcendental knowledge of what is good. It is a little bit embarrassing that we do so many things while ignorant of what are truly good things. We do not like this unpleasant truth, so we would rather take our dear values for granted, as if they are as good as truth. Unfortunately, no value is good in itself. This is a haunting problem in my mind, and I see it as a metaphysical problem of maker. Humans are the makers of so many great things, including language, agriculture, civilization, sciences, technology, industries, politics, many things. But the point is, the infinity of possibilities prevents us from knowing the best. Infinity is not a problem for God, but it fundamentally challenges human being. We risk when we do. So I ask myself to study if there is an ontology that explains the good of a world without making use of any assumed values. It means to explain the autotelic good of a world itself. In other words, to discover the ontological measures for a best world, by which a normative theory of world could be established. As I mentioned, Lao Tzu and Leibniz have set up the examples, but not enough. Lao Tzu claims his naturalism that a human being should live in harmony with nature, never trying to betray the ontological way of being that is Tao, for the so-called evident reason that nothing could run better than nature does. It is a great insight, but the point is, the human-made world and life are inevitably to be unnatural in many cases. It indicates naturalism is not enough to explain human deeds. Leibniz studied the best possible world in a theological perspective with ontological measures, though he doesn't say so, and claims that the best possible world is logically the one that consists of harmonious or composable richest collections of beings. It is exactly the ideal attributes of a mathematical system, often in terms of consistency and completeness. Leibniz's concept is perfect in logic, but a monotheistic order created by a unique mind is not enough for the more complicated human world, full of intersubjective, intercultural, international, or inter-civilizational problems and conflicts. So a theory of human world has to answer the question of multi-subject or other mind. The problem of the world is that of the many, not that of the one. By ontological measures, I mean the measures of and in a system itself, by which a system measures itself, so that the good values of a system are identical to the optimal situation of a system. For instance, consistency and the completeness are the best attributes of a mathematical system. And the holism, balance, and the evolution are the best situation for a living system. Then my question is, if ontologically measured, what are the best attributes of a political system? Here, I'm quite ambitious for an alternative solution to David Hume's problem that says to be does not entail ought to be. We could begin with the ontological epoche of values, the suspension of any assumed value, so that we could see the self-evident optimality of a system when we measure a system with itself. As expected, it leads to the transcendental or ontological analytic proposition, such as to be implies to be for good, for such and by such. Instead of the ontological fallacy, to be implies ought to be, in a word, a system could demonstrate its ontological goodness by itself. So briefly, my argument goes on in this way. First, for all beings and each being, existence presupposes coexistence, because nothing exists without being in relation with others, or nothing exists outside a system. An absolute, independent, and autonomous individual is a non-being of nowhere, thus impossible either in space-time or in civilization historicity. I'm afraid individualism is a political fabrication, lack of ontological or natural reason. Not true, at least not true in sciences. Second, the basic ontological options are to be or not to be, and it is evident that to be is ontologically good for any being, while not to be is could be ethically good in special cases. So it is the difference between the ontological measures and the ethical values. This ontological formula extends to more cases, such as order or disorder. Obviously, order is the better, since entropy increasing leads to the death of everything. Further, hostility or hospitality, then hospitality is the better, because hostility is destructive and self-destructive, and so on. I mean, this recursive applications of this ontological formula transcendentally explain the autotelic good for the beings themselves on ontological condition, independent of ethical values. My point is that beings have their ontological reasons or or autotalicity. Now, coming to the concrete case of best possible political system. First, taking account of a set of all possible worlds, we should study the extremum of the conceivable worlds, or the extreme possibility of life. That is the worst case scenario of a human world. It may be unreal, but makes sense in theories, usually recognized as the so-called original situation. The most meaningful cases must be the Hobbesian or the Xun-zi situation, a Chinese philosopher. Sorry to say that the famous Rawls theory is not universally valid. Apparently, political theory cannot be universally valid unless it considers the worst case. But Rawls' situation is not the worst. Hobbes discovers the individual problem, while Xun-zi sees a group problem. So the combination of their theories describe the most meaningful original situation. Second, I employ an evolutional game in terms of imitation test, which leads to equilibriums of imitating. The worst one is the deadlock of hostility with no more improvement in payoff and no way to change the situation. The better one is the perpetual peace with a reciprocal improvement. Imitation is the best practice to define universality. It is clear that a strategy proves to be universal if and only if it is universally feasible and efficient. And it is universally feasible and efficient if and only if it could withstand the outcome of mutual imitation and remain efficient. It indicates a universally good strategy will not invite self-defeating or counterproductive disasters when being universally imitated. Therefore, the maximum imitability defines the valid universality, which explains all kinds of strategies that are universally good, including peace, cooperation, harmony, justice, and freedom. As I said, all these strategies are always good in any imitation. Third, therefore, the autotalicity of an ideal political system must be peace, hospitality, and reciprocity, opposed to the realpolitik as a struggle for power. It reveals the true concept of the political, which is by itself meant to be the art of changing hostility into hospitality, contrary to the Hobbesian situation or Smith's recognition of enemy. It is it is a categorical mistake in confusing war with the political. In fact, politics will be of no use if it were almost a kind of war. I do not say war is always irrational, but it is unreasonable to think that wars solve problems. War is, in fact, the failure of politics. As I understand it, the political is an art of making a system that changes hostility into hospitality. Practically speaking, a system that creates relations good for everyone in the world. If physics is the theory of everything, I should say politics must be the theory of everyone. The ontological function of a best possible political system must be its reduction of the entropy in human world. And fourth, I take the ontological measuring methodology even better than a transcendental argument. I seems possible to better define autotelic goodness in terms of ontological measurable functions, such as reducing entropy, systematic robustness, balance, equilibrium, symmetry, and self-evolution, which are ontologically good for the being of beings. So it connotes that normative values are valid if and only if they coincide the autotelic goodness of beings. For instance, freedom and justice cannot be well defined unless in terms of symmetry. And the human rights will not be justified unless in balance with human duties. I'm afraid that the one-sided expansion of individual rights or the asymmetric justice or the unbalanced equality must be responsible for the increasing social entropy or disorder nowadays. One of the ontological measures that matters most in contemporary politics is the size or scale of a political system. The political entities often challenged by negative externalities are found nation-state so far. Therefore, disproportional and eventually fail to deal with the global problems in the framework of international system, such as you know, the climate change and the clash of civilization, cold wars, and even hot wars. It is happening now, and unpredictable risk of genetic technologies and the coming super AI, as well as metaverse technologies are great things if well controlled. The size matching or the methodology of measuring X by X owes to Laozi or Guan-zi. They who have the very similar statement about it. As Laozi says, to see a person as a person meant to be, to see a family as a family meant to be, to see a village as a village meant to be, to see a state as a state meant to be, and to see Tianxia as the world of under heaven, the world of all under heaven meant to be. And Guan-zi said the similar thing. Both argue measuring X by X is important to understand political matters. Then a Moist argument follows. Mozi argues that the final political system with no externalities should be a world-size inclusive system in terms of Tianxia. And now finally, based upon the ontology of coexistence, the universal validity of a political system result in the relational justification rather than unilateral justification. It suggests a concept of universality that will not be valid unless it is relationally valid. In other words, unless it is a function of subjectivity. I think the three constitutional concepts for Tianxia, as I have stated above, are ontologically good for the world. And finally, I think we have to consider the contemporary situation. I mean, it is again the Kai horse that invites Tianxia to come. About 3,000 years ago, the great king of Zhou from a small nation was facing a never encountered problem for him to rule many larger nations. The natural way to rule by force was obviously not working on such a condition. So came the great moment, a historical Kairos. His premier, Duke of Zhou, invented an inclusive and shared system that benefited all nations, thus well accepted, later recognized as Tianxia. Unfortunately, it collapsed several centuries later, mainly due to economic problems. It indicates a lesson to learn. Political harmony is not enough for a good world. Economy is always fundamental. Now again, the kairos for a new Tianxia in prospect. The global problems are getting closer to the critical point of disasters that may challenge human civilization or even the survival of human beings. All kinds of dangers, as we know, we have stated. It is a bad symptom. And worse, the growth of human civilization seems now in involution more than evolution. So, and worse, the growth of the new power based upon the unity of financial capitalism and the digital technologies, as well as other new technologies, is ahead to a new despotism, which controls all information, all data, and the social media, establishing the monopoly on all services and the communication. It otherwise rules the world by controlling all interlinks, and it could paradoxically destroy freedom and democracy by means of freedom and democracy. It is the reality, rather than a story or alarmism. It seems the old democracy has no way to resist the new despotism based upon the systematic union of technologies, financial capitalism, and intermediate. Because the new despotism itself is the Trojan horse inside democracy. The future is getting more uncertain and unpredictable. It is the first time that the artificial systems have become the greater power or the lords dominating over human beings, controlling our practice and our minds. Technologies are making a theological miracle, an ontological event in that human creates a transcendental reality in prisons. We know God created world while human creates his stories. Now a revolution is coming. Technologies are making a new ontological event of a new genesis. That is the creation of another world of new beings, a world named metaverse, supported by AI, blockchains, quantum computer, and other new technologies. Metaverse means much more than an updated internet. It will likely become a new world above our real world of so many new beings that greatly outnumber the real beings in our world. The metaverse will be an almost infinite world and soon become a political issue, since it will change our real world, will change our life. As it seems to me, it is, of course, it is a danger, but also an opportunity. As it seems to me, the metaverse could be made to be a digital Tianxia as an experimental test for a real Tianxia. According to a optimistic vision, a metaverse supported by blockchain and AI would have all information ensured, thus truly trustable. All records of everything are kept as immutable references, so that leaving little chance for cheating, tricks, or betrayals. May I say, a new Tianxia based upon compatible universalism should be good for either the metaverse or the real world. Tianxia, of course, Tianxia is a concept open to your imaginations. A French anthropologist, my friend, Alain Lebichon, coins a word, transsubjectivity, to describe the optimal outcome of intersubjectivity. I think Tianxia should be a form of transsubjectivity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tingyang, for this presentation. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts, somehow referring to your book, but then elaborating a little further, and even coming to current debates on metaverse and artificial intelligence. So thank you for this. We stop